everyone's talking about AI agents, individual ones, multi-agent systems where agents work with each other. But the question is, what actually happens when you want to introduce that into the HR landscape? Today, we'll talk about just that. So stick around for more. All right, welcome back for another episode of What's the Buzz, where leaders share how they have turned AI hype into business outcomes. Today, we'll talk about the top criteria for multi-agent systems in HR, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome my guest, Kris Saling, to the show. Kris, thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this topic. It's going to be fun.
Fantastic. Hey, we've been following each other on LinkedIn for a long time, and I'm really excited that you are taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. But maybe for those of our audience members who are not familiar with you yet, can you share a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Sure thing. So I'm Kris Saling. I'm a career Army officer. I work for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, who is basically the closest that we have for a Chief Human Resources Officer for the Army. And that means we're responsible for how we manage the talent acquisition, the training, the personal files, everything for about 1.1 million people. So it's a significant lift. And my job is to bring new technologies and AI and partnerships into the personnel domain. And it keeps us pretty busy because we've got a lot of stuff to manage.
I'm sure. Wonderful. But I also know you're sharing your personal opinions and experiences with us today. I know you've been in the data and AI space for a long time. So very thankful, again, to learn from you and bring your expertise to our audience.
I appreciate you bringing that up because I'm sharing my own personal opinions, my personal background. This is not any official Army opinions, but I've been working in this space for the Army for about 10 years, and that's been enough to accumulate a fair bit of research.
Fantastic. I'm sure. I mean, a lot has happened in the last 10 years looking at emerging technologies.
Oh, yes.
It just keeps emerging, right? That's the exciting part about it.
Mm-hmm. Faster and faster. That trajectory is just
crazy. Yeah. So folks, if you're in the audience, put a comment in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm always curious to see how global our audience is. And if you're looking to learn more about how you can empower and encourage your team members to use AI without creating slop or low quality content, consider picking up a copy of my new book, The Human Agentic AI Edge, on Amazon and any online retailer. Fantastic. All right, Kris, should we play a little game to kick things off in good fashion?
Sure.
All right. So it wouldn't be called What's the Buzz if there wasn't a buzzer. So I'll play a little clip and you'll see the wheels will start spinning. And when they stop, I'd love for you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why in your own words. To make it a little more interesting, you only have 60 seconds for your answer. So are you ready? Yeah? Okay, here we go. So if AI were a sports car, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
So that's probably your Ferrari, your Formula One racer. It's got a lot of ability to get you from A to B really quickly, but it's one of those things where you need a little bit of instruction and foundations and how these things operate to drive safely. A few years ago, I would have just said plain out a car, but right now it's like this is a speedy, high performance car that needs very deliberate instruction and handling to be able to use it safely. And we have a lot of possibilities of parking it in a storefront if we don't do it properly.
I love that. Perfect answer, right? So high speed, also high risk. But if you're the first across the finish line, big returns and lots of champagne.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it. Wonderful. But obviously we're not here to just talk about cars in Formula One. But the other exciting part of our conversation about how do we bring AI and agents, especially into organizations, right? Whether that is in the public sector or in the private sector, I think there are some things that are pretty similar. And I know you've been working on some of these things, specifically when it comes to agentic systems, multi-agent systems in the HR domain. But I'm curious, what are you seeing? What are some of the foundations about workflows, about how work's done that you need to be aware of to decide where agents even make sense?
I think that's the biggest thing that I caution people on when they're looking at integrating any kind of AI into their workflows. it's a means rather than an end. And I think so many people will sit there and say, well, we need AI. Well, to do what? So what does it do and what is it for? I separate out those questions as I'm talking to my senior leadership and my decision makers, because even if they understand what it does, the what it's for part, it's like tying everything that we bring in terms of technology, not just AI, into our business objectives and outcomes. How is it going to get us from here to that outcome? How is it going to do it quickly, safely, effectively? And then what needs to change about that underlying workflow for it to happen effectively? I think a lot of what we need to do as we're incorporating agents is not just, buy the tool, but we have to look at that entire workflow and see how that needs to change.
That isn't always easy, right? I mean, the workflows differ by department, by team, by company.
Yeah.
Some things obviously are standardized. Thinking of recruit to retire as a big process, but how do you then decide where it makes sense to put an agent in?
Well, that's one of the things too. The minute you start talking about business process review, everybody rolls their eyes and groans like, oh, it takes so long, it's so hard. But guess what? There's an AI for that. So you can take a lot of these, your business SOPs, you can take, in our case, Army regulations and publications and policies. And obviously, we want to make sure it is an appropriately ring-fenced AI tool that we're using. We don't want something open source to leak all of our information into the outer beyond, but we do have tools developed that are contained that we can do this with. We can extract those workflows, at least in a draft that people can edit. So they're not going in, filling out timesheets. How much time did you spend on this? What did you do? They have a starting point that makes it a whole lot easier to tweak and edit and say, okay, well, this step is out of line. I really do this. You can get those things done a lot faster. Then you've got kind of a starting point, which again, I'll take and feed into an AI tool and say, okay, here is the workflow. What are all the different tasks? And, give me an estimate on my reduction in time, increase in efficiency. We've got a number of different metrics that we use in this space to figure out what it is we want to do. Sometimes it's reduction of time. Sometimes it's cost avoidance. So if I have a human doing it, how many times does a product get sent back for revision? Whereas if a machine does it, it fills it out the right place, it goes forward. And then we start looking at, where's the paperwork pile up the most? And it can be virtual paperwork too. Where do the emails pile up? Where is something sitting in someone's virtual inbox in a CRM waiting to be staffed the most? Those are usually my favorite targets to integrate an agent into the mix.
So, I've been attending a number of conferences. I've talked to many peers in the industry who are bringing agentic AI into their organizations. The thing that I'm always wondering about, especially if I hear vendors talk about all the amazing things that agents can do, is how do you decide how many agents you need, what they work on, how granular you go? I'm not seeing a lot of conversation there or a lot of information being shared. So I'm curious, what are you seeing? Agents, we do a process review. We know we want to put in agents in some places, but how granular do you get, for example?
So one of the things I like to do as we're doing this, and we're fielding a multi-agent platform, several multi-agent platforms in the Army right now, is just break down the tasks, and not everything needs to be intelligent. So one of the first things I do is I use a framework that we call eliminate, simplify, automate, elevate. So I try to eliminate tasks where we really don't need to do them. It's like, does this thing, and again, you can use AI for the research. What is the provenance of this task? Why am I even doing it to begin with? Sometimes it's statutory, there's law involved, we have to do it. So, okay, leave that alone. Other times it's an artifact of something else, just was never really polished off, or we mark it as something that we look at for elimination once we integrate AI into the mix. Simplify the process as quick as possible. This could be something like a RACI chart, who's responsible, accountable, whatever. Who actually needs to see this? So who is my human in the loop that needs to review the outcomes and critically evaluate them? Then we go to automation. And I deliberately use automation because a lot of times when we have folks, unless they're working in the space that you and I are working in, they can mean I need a very intelligent system of agents, maybe 16 different agents working together on a very complex task, or this could just be RPA. It doesn't really need to be intelligent. RPA is kind of my unsung hero in the AI space because I look at a lot of these processes and functions. They just need to get done. I don't need to spend the time and the energy and the money on a complex agent. But then it kind of goes from there. It's like, how complex is the task? Does it make more sense for the guardrails to have, one agent doing all the work, or do I add one principal agent and then a supervisorial agent that'll come back through and clean it up afterwards? Because then for me, at least in the workflows that I use to build these, it's easier if it's separate because then I can troubleshoot the functions in one and troubleshoot the functions in the other. And I'm not troubleshooting an incredibly complex program. And just say for background, I'm a mathematician. I am a brute force coder at best when it comes down to it. I like to keep my workflows simple. So that's one criteria I use. How easy is it for me to go in there and figure out what part of the task went awry?
That makes a lot of sense, and especially the part of encapsulating or compartmentalizing what are the functions that this agent does, and define it at a level that it's not, too expensive or too complex that it doesn't get confused, but you can troubleshoot it too. I think that makes a lot of sense. I've been approaching my latest builds in a similar way too, to say, hey, this is this one function that you'll do, or and here are the different tasks and tools that you have. But to your point, if they're defined roles, it gets easier to troubleshoot, or even to test things in isolation.
I think that's something too that we want to think about for our future workforces. Because if you're building these things, testing these things, and operating these things, you got to be cognizant of your time. How much time do you want to spend making sure this works, or can you add in another helper agent that can help you with that? Because I think we talked a little bit about the workforce earlier. The large development teams of the past are kind of a luxury. We're not going to be able to have them either because of demand signals out in the workforce, or just scarcity of being able to grow some of these capabilities.
So about 8-9 years ago, I was working with a Fortune 100 company, big company in oil and gas, and I was very surprised when we looked at some of the finance processes. They said, "Oh, and we have this little custom-built tool here that this contractor built for us 15 years ago." We're not really sure what it does. The person has moved on. The documentation got lost somewhere, but we cannot touch or replace this because we're too concerned. If anything changes, we're not able to pay our bills. It's like, oh wow, okay, multi-billion-dollar company, with as critical as that. And I'm getting flashbacks of the intern developed apps and things that are floating around in corporations that nobody really knows anymore how they were built or where the source code is, that we might be running into something like this over time with agents as well.
We deal with that a lot.
Right. So I'm curious there, how do you see, not just the governance and the rigor of building and documenting agents, but more so when you add more and more and more agents to that mix, to a multi-agent system, how do you think about risk when it's not just additive, but it grows exponentially, right, with every agent that you add to the equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to what we did with a lot of our code when generative AI first came out. It's just like, I thought that was wonderful because I could go into my code and I wrote it 2 years ago. I code totally differently now than 2 years ago. Comment this for me. Figure out what each of these modules are so I can swap them out. I mean, I see us doing a lot of that too. Okay, I've got a multi-agent system. Agent, go inventory all my agents. Go find everybody, find their core task. And I think that's where, we really got to get into the individual data, the logs, the metadata, the kind of routine, boring information that should be captured in the background, and just go, okay, when was this thing built and by whom? When was the last time it was curated? We started doing that a few years ago with different kind of intelligent data catalog platforms. They could tell you when the last time the data was curated. Allow people rating systems. That's one thing I do want for agents as we start fielding them more throughout our organizations. I want to know what the equivalent of the blue meta checkmark is for an agent that has been validated and recently curated. And I want that to kind of fall off if nobody has validated this agent or if it hasn't been curated. I want to know that, this thing is, somebody's taken a look at it. The mechanic has looked under the hood. They've tweaked all the things. It's good to go. Or this is use at your own risk.
I think that's so important. And when we see a revival of citizen development, like
Yes.
build your own agents,
Mhm.
I feel that in many ways challenges exactly that, the governance structure, the knowing what is actually happening in my environment, who's built what agents,
Mhm.
what do they have access to, what kind of data do they process, or might they inadvertently expose, things like that. And I
Yes.
think it's especially to get to more of that enterprise grade hardened environments and governance. I think
Mhm.
that's the next level of orchestration of governance solutions that
Yeah.
we need to see pretty quickly
Mhm.
to keep pace with the deployment of agents. Yeah.
But one of the things we want to do is figure out the balance where we don't stifle innovation, because now that everybody can develop these tools, you're going to get some great ideas. And that's really kind of the common currency right now. It's not necessarily the technical acumen, because that, you can develop that. You can have your AI come in and either do some of the work for you or come up with a training plan for you. It's the what it's for piece.
Mhm.
And I love seeing it, especially in the Army side. I love seeing what soldiers are going and developing. At the same time, it's like I want them to have a sandbox to do it, and the ability for me to come in and say, this is great. Your answer goes off here. It should be here.
Mhm.
Let me help you figure out the right stuff to do to either tweak the model or get the right data to use in your model so that you can move over here into the validated side.
Mhm. So I'm absolutely with you, right? Governance is as soon as you start mentioning that term, people go like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Right? You're bogging me down. It's red tape. It's policies.
Bureaucratic. I don't want this. Yeah.
Yes, right. But at the same time, to your point, you need to strike that balance between knowing what is happening and giving people guidance, but at the same time, embracing and encouraging that level of innovation. Because at the end of the day, people that are the closest to the work
Mhm.
also see where the issues are, and they very likely come up with solutions for it if they know enough about the technology and what it can do.
Mhm. And if they know about the domain side, this is one of the arguments we have right now too, because it's like I come back to the analogy that AI is a car a lot, because you need folks who understand how it works from a mechanical standpoint, not maybe from an engineering one from scratch standpoint, but how much domain knowledge is sufficient for you to be able to build a good and useful tool. Somebody who has just driven a car a few times probably isn't necessarily going to be the person you want building another one, although they are a good test market to tell you what features it needs to have. Um, and I bring that up just because we've had some people who have built decent tools, but they're foundationally erroneous, just because they've been a user of the domain system that they're trying to improve. They don't
Yeah.
understand all of the foundational underpinnings. And that's kind of a challenge. Like, how do we get them that right? I mean, I love their initiative, but how do we get them the right level of understanding of the system?
I think that's so key. How do you do that? Do you have some formalized training programs? Do you have office hours? Do you have town halls?
Mhm.
How do you source information and at the same time are only an arm's length away if they need help?
Yeah, no, I wish I had a good answer for that. We've talked about this a little bit too. We focus so much on providing the AI education and the tool education that we've really kind of forgotten that we need to provide the domain education too, especially where these AI tools are taking over from where people were getting that domain education to begin with. And they get it, unfortunately, by doing the toil, by doing the rote, boring tasks that build up your understanding of the overall system. And then okay, this is why we do it. And once we automate it away, you understand like what went into that automation. But if that automation is there instantaneously, or it's already there when you get there, how do you understand those foundations?
So in a way, kind of like we still teach the foundations of electricity if you want to
Mhm.
be an electrical engineer, even though we just plug in a device into the socket, right? We still need to
Right.
understand that, or physics or chemistry, to be able to work at higher levels of it.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a little more on the input and output and all these things that we need to understand than it just goes input output into a black box. Like, there's
True.
logic that went into the building of the box. How do we see that and understand it in a way that provides that kind of domain expertise that I think we're really going to be thirsty for in
Mhm.
coming years?
Now, obviously, a lot of that innovation, when it comes to agents, when it comes to multi-agent systems, is similar to how we think about humans, how we think about human teams. In my book, I make the case that you need to have a job description for your agent. It'll need to abide by some kind of code of conduct, whether it's values or professional standards. Think of IFRS or similar ones.
Mm-hmm.
You need to tell them what tools are available, what data is available, what other agents are available to collaborate with, and how to find them. So that's how I usually think about them as digital employees, just in that sense of governance, guardrails, guidelines, similar to humans. At the same time, they're just a piece of software, so you're still responsible for the decisions and actions that it takes.
Yes.
But from an HR point of view, how do you see that? I mean, it's evolving rapidly. We're talking about hybrid workforces of humans and systems, or humans and AI. But a lot of times I see HR isn't even at the table. What are your observations in?
We are constantly fighting to be at the table on the HR side, because you're just like, well, that's the human side. You're just doing the transactional human work. Well, we need to be doing more than that. We need to be doing full spectrum talent management, which I separate out from HR, because HR has your transactional functions. You're making sure people get managed, they're paid, their documents are correct. We want to make sure that we are developing our workforce, that we are categorizing and reevaluating, that it becomes a continuous evaluation of the skills inventory and the requirements of the job. And that way we can make more effective pivots, more effective matches, and we can create tools. I call this our Waze model for talent management. It's, again, a lot of analogies with cars. Because Waze, you give it your data and it tells you how to get from point A to point B using the rest of the data repository and what it gets from the Department of Transportation more effectively. I want to create tools like that for my employees so that they're not just, taking a skills assessment, filling out another preferences survey. I want them to be able to see, here are the things I can do. Here are the jobs out there that I'm qualified for as I grow my career through this organization. Or in the cases, I see some of my tasks getting automated. I need to figure out what my next progression is. Well, let's do this. And that also gives you a way to use the tools and benefits you offer as a company and say, no, I'm not just giving you, CPE credits. I'm not giving you certification funding. I'm not providing all these other things. This is how you use it to get to that next goal.
I think that's so important right now, because I see in the private sector a lot of talk about, hey, we cut off the bottom, we give that to AI, we don't need entry-level people or roles, AI will do all of that. And then some organizations are already waking up to the fact that, oh boy, we need to build a talent bench who's going to succeed our senior leaders and experts that are in these roles now once they move up out. But at the same time, there's not a lot of clarity on what does it take to become more senior and an expert now that AI supposedly can cover the bottom part of it. That's where I think it's so important what you're sharing. Yes, part of your work will eventually be delegated to AI and to agents, but what is that other part that we want to help you qualify for and learn about and become more proficient in? So again, you have 100% role again, not just a 60% or 50% role.
No, exactly. I think we have to be more flexible in the way we think about careers, and everything's going to be evolutionary. The job that you take is not going to be the same job a couple years down the line. It's going to be very different. Your task load is going to evolve. You're going to be partnering with automation more than you thought you would. You might have a totally different role that you've moved your way into. But I think providing doing the skills inventory, providing these different pathways that people have in order to be able to grow, makes it a decision on their part rather than a decision that's made for them as these tasks are getting automated away.
Sounds like in a lot of ways, when you have ownership of the decision and of your own destiny, it feels a lot better because you feel a lot more in control rather than something happening to you. It's happening with you or because of you or because of your own initiative, right?
In all of the talent management efforts I've been a part of on the Army side, we've really prioritized autonomy and agency. It might sound counterintuitive with the military, but we are an all-volunteer force. Everybody has raised their hands and signed up to do this. And retaining our talented workforce means they're continuing to volunteer. So we want them to continue to volunteer for things that are good fits, for opportunities they see beneficial, and for things that will make them good citizens whenever they finally depart service. Because I've said often, both in official and unofficial capacity, the Army is a net exporter of talent. after a certain amount of time, whether it's their initial term of service or a career where they retire from service, we are giving people back to the American community. And our goal is not to just keep people forever. It's for them to go out and be massively successful contributors to the American workforce. The more we can give them to be able to do that, the better off we all are.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think especially in this time when there's change, when there are opportunities to evolve and, make the next career step as you progress. Now, Kris, I can't believe that we're almost at the end of the show. Feels like time has gone by so quickly. But I was wondering, before we wrap up, if you can summarize the key 3 takeaways for our audience today.
I think the key takeaways are that the foundations still matter. You brought it up with how we teach physics and electricity. We have to think about the foundations from all the different other aspects of our business and the aspects of the technology, and how are we going to incorporate a baseline understanding of those. The other, this is a fast car. It's moving quickly. If we understand how to drive it appropriately, it's going to be great. And we have to realize that there are a lot of other cars on the road, and we have to be able to play well with them. I think that comes in from the governance aspect, because everybody kind of goes, this is bureaucratic. It's traffic laws. It keeps us from crashing. And then I think the last piece is that the human element, everybody worries that, we're going to have these fleets of agents that are going to take everything. We also thought once upon a time that everybody's jobs were going to go away because we implemented, machinery and manufacturing. And, some of your older audience will remember all the effectiveness that email was going to give us, because, you weren't traveling from desk to desk. It just made more work. So our work is going to evolve. AI is going to take our tasks. I don't think it's going to take, our jobs, as long as we're able to keep using that eliminate, simplify, automate, elevate framework. And we keep elevating our human workforce into the work humans can do, and then getting rid of the other things that keep us from doing that work humans can do.
I love that. So encouraging and powerful to come back to our human capabilities for sure, in determine what is it that makes us really good and makes us really human at what we do as well.
Exactly.
Kris, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. It was a pleasure having you on. I learned a lot about how to think about multi-agent systems, how it evolves, how it involves HR as well. And I hope you in the audience are taking away a lot of good learnings as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. This was a really fun conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And folks, see you next time for another episode of What's the Buzz. Bye-bye.